Mr David Shoebridge.
Mr President, just last week, the Minister for Corrections, David Elliott, said that incarceration rates should not be necessarily things that we need to look through the prism of the colour of someone's skin or their religion, and that anybody incarcerated, he said, was a tragedy. The real tragedy is that the Minister refuses to acknowledge that the New South Wales criminal justice system is systematically failing our First Peoples. When the Coalition Government was elected in 2011, there were 2,269 people in New South Wales custody that identified as Aboriginal Australians. Today, there are 3,059, and any government that oversees a criminal justice system that puts 35% more Aboriginal people in jail than when they came into office needs a good, hard look at itself. Not only has the absolute number of Aboriginal people in jail increased, but so has the proportion of Aboriginal people in jail. Now, with nearly 1/4 of all adult prisoners in New South Wales identifying as Aboriginal. And in the juvenile justice system, the situation is even worse, with more than 53% of those detainees in the juvenile justice system identifying as Aboriginal. When the Indigenous population of Australia is only 2.5% of the overall population, it's impossible not to recognise this as an issue of race. Our justice system is currently imprisoning adult Aboriginal people at more than 11 times the rate of non-Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people are more likely to be recognised as offenders, more likely to be convicted, and more likely to serve a custodial sentence than their non-Aboriginal counterparts. And this pattern of undeniable racial prejudice in New South Wales has been fostered by successive governments, both Labor and Coalition. The overrepresentation of Aboriginal people in the prison system is not just a factor of this government. And indeed, when you look for the period between 2006 and 2016, which is a period of both Labor and Coalition governments, the prison population as a whole has grown by 13%. But the Aboriginal prison population has grown by 31% in that time. There are multiple reasons for this: aggressive and discretionary policing, higher sentencing rates, and a higher rate of bail refusal for Aboriginal people. An expansion of police discretionary powers alongside more aggressive policing has removed many of the safeguards in our criminal justice system. Supported by a legislated trust in gut instinct policing, New South Wales police are targeting and arresting Aboriginal Australians at a rate far above their non-Aboriginal counterparts. We know that once an Aboriginal Australian enters the criminal justice system, they're more likely to be convicted. They're more likely to get a custodial sentence. That custodial sentence is likely to be longer than their non-Aboriginal counterparts, and they're far more likely to be refused bail. Yet the New South Wales Government, and the Minister in particular, remains in denial and determined to stand by that denial of racism in the system. Justice reinvestment, the redirection of money spent on prisons to community-based initiatives, which aims to address the underlying causes of crime, is being touted around the world as a viable and effective solution to traditional prison management strategies. But in New South Wales, diversionary options remain extremely limited, especially in regional and remote areas, which are home to many Indigenous communities. And as we know, convictions for minor offences are rising, with 95% of Aboriginal prisoners serving sentences of less than 2 years. There is a pilot program of justice reinvestment in New South Wales being implemented in northwest New South Wales at Bourke, and where there is a focus on prevention of crime through education and social services funding, and it's community directed. But a one-off pilot project won't fix this. It needs a consistent two-pronged approach that winds back discretionary police powers and stops making mistakes, like the $3.8 billion in additional jail cells, some 7,000 new prison beds, that is the government's only response to the issue. This is a cycle which is worsening. And if the New South Wales justice system keeps doing what it's doing, business as usual will lose another generation of Aboriginal Australians. This becomes crushingly obvious when we turn our gaze to the juvenile justice system, where while just where Aboriginal Australians, young Aboriginal Australians, represent some 53% of those in detention. Our First Peoples need a minister, a corrective services minister, who understands the issues facing their community. Minister Elliott says that he will ensure that everyone will get every opportunity to be rehabilitated. But what that includes is an opportunity, an appalling opportunity for too many Aboriginal Australians to be in jail in the first place where they need rehabilitation. With the focus perpetually set on jail and punishment at the cost of crucial preventative measures, the Coalition is entrenching Aboriginal overrepresentation in our criminal justice system. Fixing this requires a fundamental change in the government's approach to criminal justice. But we will never get that. We will never approach that point with a minister who stubbornly refuses to see the undeniable fact of racial bias in our criminal justice system against our First Peoples.
Mr. President.